I'm just curious. Good morning, folks. Let's see. Still waiting on a couple. We've got Charles, we've got Lucas, Paulo, Resi, John, and Tavion. Just waiting on Jordan and Amity. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and mark these guys absent, and if they show up, then I will change it. All right, what is on our docket today? Okay, first thing, on Canvas, you have got a new quick assignment, which is called Syntax 1. And I think from here on out, instead of doing like 4 or 5 of these exercises at a time, I think I'm just going to do a weekly grade for them because it's just easier for me. And then I don't have anybody thinking that, oh, I didn't turn this in, or trying to catch up on which ones you haven't turned in. And that way the most there'll be per week is 2. So we're looking at Syntax 1. Yesterday we looked at the paragraph that was from Virginia Woolf, and she had the one exclamatory sentence in the middle that really intensified and clarified what she was talking about. So today, you're going to write a declarative sentence about college entrance examinations like the SAT or ACT. If you've never taken either of those, that's fine. You can write about taking other standardized tests for school, because we all have. None of us like it, as far as I know. And I feel like it'd be sort of weird if you loved the SATs, but maybe you do. And then write an exclamatory sentence which amplify, my God, I can't say it. Then write an exclamatory sentence which amplifies or clarifies the declarative sentence. So you're writing 2 sentences here. And for some reason, that's one of the things that we've struggled with so far in this. Like if the directions say write 1 sentence, people don't want to just write 1 sentence. If they say 2 sentences, you want to write a lot more. It's just 2 sentences. Write a declarative sentence and then an exclamatory sentence to amplify or clarify it. So it's 9:13. I think I'll give y'all until about 9:20. That's 7 minutes. That should be long enough. And if it's not, then you can let me know that you need more time. But y'all go ahead and do that, and I'll check back in with you in a few minutes. Okay, do we need any more time? I know, Jordan, you might need a little bit more time. That's fine. Anybody else? Okay, we're gonna move on then. Let me see what's next for us. Today is Tuesday. Okay, cool. So I have published a couple of things on Canvas, and one is what we're about to read together. It's an essay that's a comedic essay by a famous humorist. And then you'll see below that Kofer and Sedaris exploring the text. I thought about just giving us the Kofer part and then going into Sedaris later, but since tomorrow will be pretty much a work day, I think I'd rather just give it to you now and let you do all of it together. So if you open that, you'll see that there's 8 questions about Myth of the Latin Woman, and then after that, 8 questions about the one we're about to read. So if you want to kind of take a quick look at those questions, and maybe you can keep some of these things in mind. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, and then I'll read it out loud in one sec. But how does the author David Sedaris establish a humorous tone in the first 2 paragraphs, and what details contribute to that tone? How does Sedaris manage to make us laugh at the other students? This thing is about a French class, without seeming to mock or make fun of them. What effect does he achieve by including actual dialogue? How does Sedaris characterize the teacher? I'm just going to kind of briefly go through these. What does he mean when he writes that understanding another language is a small step, nothing more, yet its rewards are intoxicating and deceptive? Examples of understatement and hyperbole. What is his point in this essay? He's trying to make a serious point through laughter and comedy. He describes an unusual class, but for it to be funny, it really needs to resonate with us. Look at that typo. I'm so mad. To some extent. So what aspect of the experience of being a student does he count on as common ground between himself and his readers? And then lastly, there's this quote from a philosopher who says, several have defined man as an animal which laughs. They might equally as well have defined him as an animal which is laughed at. For if any other animal or some lifeless object produces the same effect, it's always because of some resemblance to man, or the stamp he gives it, or the use he puts it to. So does the essay we're about to read more effectively present people as creatures who laugh or are laughed at? So I think I'm going to open it up separately just because I can make it bigger. Me talk pretty. Why do I have so many different copies of this? Okay. So just for the record, this is about a time that the author was taking French classes in France and sort of the hijinks that ensue. There are a couple of times when it looks like gibberish, and that can be confusing to some people when you're reading it for the first time. And it's just like his attempt at like mimicking a foreign language without understanding what it said. You'll see what I mean. Okay. At the age of 41, I'm returning to school and have to think of myself as what my French textbook calls a true debutante. After paying my tuition, I was issued a student ID, which allows me a discounted entry fee at movie theaters, puppet shows, and Festiland, a far-flung amusement park that advertises with billboards picturing a cartoon stegosaurus sitting in a canoe and eating what appears to be a ham sandwich. I've moved to Paris with hopes of learning the language. My school is an easy 10-minute walk from my apartment, and on the first day of class, I arrived early, watching as the returning students greeted one another in the school lobby. Vacations were recounted and questions were raised concerning mutual friends with names like Kang and Vlatnya. Regardless of their nationalities, everyone spoke what sounded to me like excellent French. Some accents were better than others, but the students exhibited an ease and confidence that I found intimidating. As an added discomfort, they were all young, attractive, and well-dressed, causing me to feel not unlike Pa Kettle trapped backstage after a fashion show. The first day of class was nerve-wracking because I knew I'd be expected to perform. That's the way they do it here. It's everybody into the language pool, sink or swim. The teacher marched in, deeply tanned from a recent vacation, and proceeded to rattle off a series of administrative announcements. I spent quite a few summers in Normandy, and I took a month-long French class before leaving New York. I'm not completely in the dark, yet I understood only half of what this woman was saying. If you have not mentioned it or by this time, then you should not be in this room. Has everyone a certificate? Everyone? Good. We shall begin. She spread out her lesson plan and sighed, saying, all right, then, who knows the alphabet? It was startling because A, I hadn't been asked that question in a while, and B, I realized while laughing that I myself did not know the alphabet. They're the same letters, but in France, they're pronounced differently. I know the shape of the alphabet, but had no idea what it actually sounded like. Ah, the teacher went to the board and sketched the letter A. Do we have anyone in the room whose first name commences with an A? Two Polish Annas raised their hands, and the teachers instructed them to present themselves by stating their names, nationalities, occupations, and a brief list of things they liked and disliked in this world. The first Anna hailed from an industrial town outside of Warsaw and had front teeth the size of tombstones. She worked as a seamstress, enjoyed quiet times with friends, and hated the mosquito. Oh, really? The teacher said. How very interesting. I thought that everyone loved the mosquito, but here in front of all the world, you claim to detest him. How is it that we've been blessed with someone as unique and original as you? Tell us, please. I'm going to take a quick pause so I can
love that teacher. That's so funny.
Huh?
I love that teacher. That's hilarious.
Yeah, she's a little bit of a jerk, but in a funny way. I'm going to close the door. Someone's like, I don't know, using a power drill in the hall or something. I don't know what's going on out there.
Nelson.
Probably.
Oh, you're fine.
It was a drill, but I didn't know. I still don't know who it was. They're like inside a room, but it was from Miss Singletary's room. So
She be trying to drill out of there.
I don't know what she's doing in there. I'm curious now. I'll go find out after this class. Okay, back to this jerky teacher. What was the word that we said yesterday instead of a-hole? Oh, blackguard. She's
Yeah.
blackguard. The seamstress did not understand what was being said, but knew that this was an occasion for shame. Her rabbity mouth huffed for breath, and she stared down at her lap as though the appropriate comeback were stitched somewhere alongside the zipper of her slacks. The second Anna learned from the first and claimed to love sunshine and detest lies. It sounded like a translation of one of those Playmate of the Month data sheets. The answers always written in the same loopy handwriting. Turn-ons, mom's famous 5-alarm chili. Turn-offs, insecurity, and guys who come on too strong. The two Polish Annas surely had clear notions of what they loved and hated, but like the rest of us, they were limited in terms of vocabulary, and this made them appear less than sophisticated. The teacher forged on, and we learned that Carlos, the Argentine bandoneon, I don't know what that is, player, loved wine, music, and in his words, making sex with the womans of the world. Next came a beautiful young Yugoslav who identified herself as an optimist, saying that she loved everything life had to offer. The teacher licked her lips, revealing a hint of the sauce box we would later come to know. She crouched low for her attack, placed her hands on the young woman's desk, and leaned close, saying, oh, yeah? And do you love your little war?
Suck it.
I know.
Yugoslavian.
While the optimist struggled to defend herself, I scrambled to think of an answer to what had obviously become a trick question. How often is one asked what he loves in this world? More to the point, how often is one asked and then publicly ridiculed for his answer? I recalled my mother, flushed with wine, pounding the tabletop one night, saying, I love a good steak cooked rare. I love my cat, and I love, my sisters and I leaned forward, waiting to hear our names. Tums, our mother said. I love Tums. The teacher killed some time accusing the Yugoslavian girl of masterminding a program of genocide, and I jotted frantic notes in the margins of my pad. While I can honestly say that I love leafing through medical textbooks devoted to severe dermatological conditions, the hobby is beyond the reach of my French vocabulary, and acting it out would only have invited controversy.
Now that's a good response.
That is a pretty good response. Although I think it's really interesting that his hobby is leafing through medical textbooks devoted to severe dermatological conditions.
I think they're just trying to pick things out that the teacher can't possibly have an opinion on.
Yeah, exactly. But like he can't talk about that in French because he doesn't know how to say any of that stuff anyway. And if he tries to act it out, who knows what she's going to think he's doing. Geez. When called upon, I delivered an effortless list of things that I detest: blood sausage, intestinal pates, brain pudding. I learned these words the hard way. Having given it some thought, I then declared my love for IBM typewriters, the French word for bruise, and my electric floor waxer. It was a short list, but still I managed to mispronounce IBM and assign the wrong gender to both the floor waxer and the typewriter. The teacher's reaction led me to believe that these mistakes were capital crimes in the country of France. Were you always this positive? She asked. Even a knows that a typewriter is feminine. I absorbed as much of her abuse as I could understand, thinking, but not saying, that I find it ridiculous to assign a gender to an inanimate object which is incapable of disrobing and making an occasional fool of itself. Why refer to Lady Crackpipe or Good Sir Dishrag when these things could never live up to all that their sex implied? Which is definitely like a very American way to look at this, because English is like the only language pretty much.
Yeah, exactly.
Not assign gender to different things.
I
We don't really get it. Like, we're just not used to doing that. Although the idea of Lady Crackpipe or Good Sir Dishrag is very funny. The teacher proceeded to belittle everyone from German Eva, who hated laziness, to Japanese Yukari, who loved paintbrushes and soap. Italian, Thai, Dutch, Korean, and Chinese. We all left class foolishly believing that the worst was over. She'd shaken us up a little, but surely that was just an act designed to weed out the dead weight. We didn't know it then, but the coming months would teach us what it was like to spend time in the presence of a wild animal, something completely unpredictable. Her temperament was not based on a series of good and bad days, but rather good and bad moments. We soon learned to dodge chalk and protect our heads and stomachs whenever she approached us with a question. She hadn't yet punched anyone, but it seemed wise to protect ourselves against the inevitable. This would be such a terrifying teacher to be in her class if they're having to like dodge chalk, throwing stuff at them, which like would not fly here. Like, we can't just go around throwing stuff at kids, much as we might want to sometimes. Though we were forbidden to speak anything but French, the teacher would occasionally use us to practice any of her 5 fluent languages. I hate you, she said to me one afternoon. Her English was flawless. I really, really hate you. Call me sensitive, but I couldn't help but take it personally. After being singled out as a lazy kid, I took to spending 4 hours a night on my homework, putting in even more time whenever we were assigned an essay. I suppose I could have gotten by with less, but I was determined to create some sort of identity for myself. David, the hard worker, David, the cut up. We'd have one of those complete the sentence exercises, and I'd fool with the thing for hours, invariably settling on something like, a quick run around the lake? I'd love to. Just give me a moment while I strap on my wooden leg. The teacher, through word and action, conveyed the message that if this was my idea of an identity, she wanted nothing to do with it. My fear and discomfort crept beyond the borders of the classroom and accompanied me out onto the wide boulevards. Stopping for a coffee, asking directions, depositing money in my bank account. These things were out of the question, as they involved having to speak. Before beginning school, there'd been no shutting me up, but now I was convinced that everything I said was wrong. When the phone rang, I ignored it. If someone asked me a question, I pretended to be deaf. I knew my fear was getting the best of me when I started wondering why they don't sell cuts of meat in vending machines. My only comfort was the knowledge that I was not alone. Huddled in the hallways and making the most of our pathetic French, my fellow students and I engaged in the sort of conversation commonly overheard in refugee camps. Sometimes me cry alone at night. That'd be common for I also, but be more strong, you. Much worse. Say you talk pretty. People start love you soon. Maybe tomorrow, okay? Unlike the French class I had taken in New York, there was no sense of competition. When the teacher poked a shy Korean in the eyelid with a freshly sharpened pencil, we took no comfort. That's horrible. We took no comfort in the fact that unlike Hey Yun Cho, we all know the irregular past tense of the verb to defeat. In all fairness, the teacher hadn't meant to stab the girl, but neither did she spend much time apologizing, saying only, well, you should have been more. Over time, it became impossible to believe that any of us would ever improve. Fall arrived and it rained every day, meaning we would now be scolded for the water dripping from our coats and umbrellas. It was mid-October when the teacher singled me out, saying, "Every day spent with you is like having a cesarean section." And it struck me that for the first time since arriving in France, I could understand every word that someone was saying. Understanding doesn't mean that you can suddenly speak the language. Far from it. It's a small step, nothing more, yet its rewards are intoxicating and deceptive. The teacher continued her diatribe, and I settled back, bathing in the subtle beauty of each new curse and insult. "You exhaust me with your foolishness and reward my efforts with nothing but pain. Do you understand me?" The world opened up, and it was with great joy that I responded, "I know the thing that you speak exact now. Talk me more, you. Plus, please, plus." That being said, that's the end of it. I don't know why there's so many. Oh, there's like discussion questions or whatever. We're not going to do those. I feel like I want to adopt this phrase. "You exhaust me with your foolishness and reward my efforts with nothing but pain." I like that. So obviously this is a good bit different than the myth of the Latin woman. This is more focused on a specific thing that happened to him, a particular time in his life, and when he was living in Paris and going to these French lessons, and what he learned from it and what the experience was like. Whereas with Kofer's essay, The Myth of the Latin Woman, it takes place over more years. It's less focused on one particular instance, but more like this event that keeps coming up in her life, or this pattern that she keeps seeing in her life of this racism and sexism towards her and towards other Latin women. So obviously that one is a lot more serious. It's got some humor in it, but this one is intended to be funny. But they both have a bigger message and something that can connect with particular readers, whoever we think their audience was meant to be. And you're probably I would expect that you might like one more than the other, and that you might think that one is a more effective memoir, and those two things might not be the same thing. These questions that y'all are gonna start working on today about these two is not the last time that we will deal with these two essays, for the record, and we'll still be working with these later on this week. I kind of have to change my schedule around a little bit, but so you've got the 8 questions on Myth of the Latin Woman, and then 8 questions on the one that we just read. If it's easier for you, like having just read this, to go back through and do the questions about this one first, totally fine. In fact, if you want to go ahead and do the 8 questions for this one and then save the next 8, the Myth of the Latin Woman questions, for tomorrow, that's also fine. Tomorrow will be a Wednesday work day, and when you get into class, I'll give you a list of things that you could still get credit for. There are some things at this point that are too late to get credit for, but I will let you know. And some of you have asked me about extra time on some things, so that's fine. And I think that's it. I'm gonna end us 20 minutes early, unless anybody has anything for the good of the group, and let you guys just go ahead and start working on these questions. We're all good? All right. We'll then get to it, and I will see y'all tomorrow.
All right, see you.
Bye.